What the problem that solves was before we had the shadow system, the brigade did not have its own unmanned aerial reconnaissance capability. And reconnaissance in this case means the ability for the commander to put those eyes over a particular target or geographical area where they could see remotely what was going on in the battle space, and then relay that full motion video, day or night, into the command operations center so that they can make tactical decisions based on that information. So it fills that niche where you had a tactical asset that was right there at the relatively low Army organization that the commander could operate, maintain, and redirect as he saw fit 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In the Army, we build our unmanned aerial systems as systems, or unmanned aircraft systems. So the airplane is the airplane. It carries the sensor or communications relay payload or whatever is on it. Then you have the data link that goes to the ground, and then the ground control station, which is where the soldiers are, and then the network that goes out from that. And of course, in the modular force, we're networked with the infrastructure we have today. In future combat systems, you know, the whole design is about the network. So it's very important, I think, to understand that when we talk about in the Army, it really is designed as a system. Before we had the shadow system, the way that the commander fought, he did both ground and airborne surveillance and reconnaissance. So you would send out scouts on the ground, Humvees or Bradleys, to go out into an overwatch position, collect information, send periodic reports back. Then you have your Kiowa scout helicopters that would do the airborne scout mission. But when we brought the shadow into the Army, the shadow system provided something that was additive to those two capabilities, 5 to 7 hours of remote dwell time that now gave the commander that ability to do that, you know, essentially with an aircraft that they could fly remotely with the soldiers on the ground in a ground control station. So what it did is it added a capability as opposed to displace something else. So now you added an unmanned aircraft system with a manned aircraft system with a manned ground system, and you actually added a third element to that maneuver capability, and plus the dwell time of 5 to 7 hours relative to say a Kiowa Warrior, which is about 2 to 2.5 hours. So the commander could launch that aircraft, position it, conduct the surveillance, launch manned aircraft if necessary. Let's say that you're going into a city like Samarra, northeast of Baghdad, and you're getting ready to do a coordinate search mission. Well, now by using the shadow system or any other UAV system, I can now fly that system in advance of my contact, investigate the situation north, south, east, and west, actually fly back towards my own position and get, you know, essentially the enemy's view of what the route is going to look like that I'm about to traverse. So right there, that ability to gain three-dimensional situational awareness, very important. Another aspect is called battle damage assessment. By having the unmanned observation take place when you're actually in lethal fires and you're shooting at buildings or vehicles, now what you can do is observe that real time, determine whether or not the first shot was on target, and you don't have to shoot again, so it eliminates or reduces rather your collateral effects of making, so you're shooting at what you want to shoot at and you're not hitting what you don't want to hit by reinforcing fires that are unnecessary. General Sullivan, when he was the Chief of Staff of the Army, set out this dictum that we would own the night. And being able to observe daytime, twilight, and nighttime with that integrated camera, what that prevents is the belief that, hey, it's dark now, I can go out and dig a hole and put an IED in place and you can't see me. As the infrared imagery is almost as good as the daytime imagery. So there, one of the things that does is suppresses, because it didn't take the enemy very long to learn that nighttime doesn't yield me a great advantage over daytime. So that changed the enemy's calculus. But the other thing, by integrating the different sensor information, the daytime TV, like your TV at home, your infrared, which gives you the 3 to 12 micron imagery, the infrared range. Now what I can do is I can compare the daytime imagery with the nighttime imagery and do what we call change detection. Now, as we start to get better and better in integrating the unmanned aircraft, the Shadow, with manned aircraft, the Kiowa Warrior, or coming online as the Armed Reconnaissance Helicopter, is how the manned and unmanned aviation will work together. Now, one of the things that needs to be understood is what's called the dwell time of 5 to 7 hours for the Shadow, up to 35 hours for the Warrior system, which we're bringing on board here shortly, 90 minutes for the Raven system, which is a hand-thrown UAV. So you start to lay out those intervals of how long your manned aviation can fly and then your unmanned aviation can fly, and you put that together into additive parts. So now I get the observation and the lethal effects, and we're putting a laser designator on the Shadow. So now the UAV pilot can laze the target, what we call laze it, and now a manned aircraft or artillery or precision mortar can fire on that laser designation. So you see you're evolving from pre-planned missions to dynamic missions to missions that incorporate manned assets, air and ground, and then laser designation. So when you start to put that together, you get what we call the closure of the sensor shooter cycle. So I see it, I understand it, I act on it, and then with the battle damage assessment, I can review it. You know, just in a couple of years, we have, between the Department of Defense and Homeland Security, shown how to use UAVs for tactical operations that the Border Patrol does for their, so that's ongoing. That's a pretty significant evolution in just a couple of years. The main thing that I think AAI did as a company was they didn't get spooked over their initial. They went to what we call the initial operational test and evaluation, and they had some problems with the engine, with the propulsion, and you know, I think some companies would have just kind of retreated into their comfort zone and maybe blame the government or maybe, you know, whatever. They really didn't make any excuses. They knuckled down, weathered through that. My predecessor, Colonel Mike Hamilton, personally made sure that the Army bucked up and supported it. We had great support from the senior leadership in the Army. In fact, General Griffin, who's the commander of Army Materiel Command today, General Cody, who's the current Vice Chief of Staff, General Keane, his predecessor, Mr. Bolton, the Army Acquisition Executive, you know, those folks, you know, we the Army were committed to make this work, but make it work sensibly. So you had a relatively small company, I think $200 to $300 million a year is the whole, relatively small company with really a niche product that they got behind. They made it work. We went back to the operational test a year later, passed that, the first system in the Department of Defense to go into full rate production, which is, you know, it may not be as heavily regulated as the nuclear industry, but it's pretty heavily regulated. So to be able to get through all those wickets and go into what's called a full rate production decision, the first one for an unmanned aircraft system in DoD history, competitively acquired, and now the rest is history. The procurement, industry's ability to ramp up quickly and build relatively low-cost, highly reliable systems, and the military and civilian leadership to endorse it and sometimes take some calculated risk that they saw that this was just way too important and the opportunity was just way too great to take counsel. And I think they when they had the opportunity to hit the brakes, they actually stepped on the accelerator and said, this is the right thing to do. And then I think it's been for the acquisition and industry folks to really make sure that what they built was supportable when it got downrange. Their folks in their key positions tend to get in there and they believe in what they're doing and they stay. You have some folks in that corporation that have been with UAVs now 25 years. So yeah, they're zealots, I think. Trying to keep the weight down so that you can get your launch, so you can launch it easily, carry the biggest payload with the most reliable engine, and then be able to land it, rearm, or we don't arm it, but refuel it, do the pre-flight checks, and get it back up on the launcher in 30 minutes. So, you know, that's a pretty quick turn. Also keep in mind in the military environment, you have to do that in the rain, you have to do it in the cold, you have to do it in the dust, you have to do it in 139-degree heat, And you have to be able to do that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for a whole tour in Iraq. So you start to think about building a system that rugged, that can also be maintained by soldiers from 14 to 62. You have to make sure the training is suitable, the system design is reliable enough that John Burke, right off the street, goes through basic training and advanced individual training, and now I become a shadow operator or mechanic, and I can use the system. So you're trying to balance simplicity, cost, reliability, performance, sustainability. You're trying to get that all together into a 350-pound aircraft that can fly for 7 hours. So yeah, it's pretty elegant because they've managed to figure out how to do that and still keep the system pretty simple. I think it's fascinating the way that the commanders, and when I say commander, that can be a Sergeant E5 who's in charge of a fire team all the way to a 3-star general. All those different layers of command, from 5 guys to, I don't know, 250,000, how those commanders constantly are using their imagination and their understanding of the situation to put the way we use unmanned systems together with everything else that's going on. The rate of use of the unmanned aircraft systems since the beginning of Operation Iraqi Freedom has just been, truly an exponential curve, and it doesn't look like it's going to abate at all.
Hoo-ah!